"Move your car," Donovan Zane shouted, slamming the door of a sleek black Rolls-Royce that was no longer moving. The driver had bailed minutes ago, stuck in bumper-to-bumper chaos in downtown Chicago. And Donovan, in a tailored navy suit and Italian leather shoes, was now stranded on the corner of West Monroe with a ticking clock and a billion-dollar meeting waiting uptown. He ran a hand through his dark hair, jaw tight. "I swear, if I lose this acquisition because of a traffic jam, I can give you a ride," a voice called out. He turned, eyebrows raised. A dented silver hatchback idled at the curb. Behind the wheel sat a woman with long, wild brown hair tied into a messy braid. Her face was flushed with summer heat, and her window was rolled halfway down. "You look like you're about to combust." Donovan blinked. "I don't take rides from strangers." "Well, then keep yelling at parked cars. I've got 10 minutes before I pick up my nephew. You've got 1 minute to decide." He hesitated. His phone had died. His driver had vanished. No cabs. No Ubers. And the meeting? It was the kind that changed corporations. "Fine," he muttered, yanking the passenger door open and sliding in. "Don't kill me." "No promises," she said, grinning as she hit the gas. The car lurched forward, weaving through traffic with reckless precision. Donovan gripped the door. "You drive like a maniac. You sit like you've never been in a real car before," she shot back. He side-eyed her. She had a stain on her jeans coffee, probably, and an old band tee that clung to her like it had seen better days. Her dashboard was decorated with a tiny plastic dinosaur and a half-eaten granola bar. "What's your name?" he asked, still annoyed but oddly curious. "Willa Grant," she said. "You?" He hesitated. "Don." She snorted. "You don't look like a Don." "Well, you don't look like a cab driver." "I'm not. I run a non-profit. But traffic was light when I left the event, and now I'm regretting helping your grumpy face." He looked at her again. This time really looked. There was something about her. Not just the way she drove like she owned the road, or the fact she didn't bat an eye at chauffeuring a 6'2" man in a $10,000 suit. It was how she didn't flinch when he barked orders, didn't fumble when he gave her the address of the towering glass building uptown, and didn't seem to care who he was, more specifically, who he wasn't pretending to be. "You said non-profit. What kind?" he asked, relaxing slightly. She glanced at him. "Youth mentorship. Arts programs, music scholarships, after-school stuff. That doesn't pay well." "Nope," she said, popping the pea. "But I'm not in it for the money." He looked out the window, silent for a moment. "You're different." She shrugged. "You're late." They pulled up to the curb in front of the Zane Global building. The security guard at the front recognized Donovan immediately and stepped forward, but Donovan waved him off. "How much do I owe you?" he asked Willa. She rolled her eyes. "You think I'm a cab for real? I don't like owing people." "Then don't." She leaned over and unlocked the door. "Go make your billion-dollar meeting, Don." He paused. "Can I see you again?" She blinked. "You want to carpool again?" "No," he said slowly. "I want to see you again." Willa tilted her head. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." She smiled, and for the first time it wasn't sarcastic. "You're something else, Don." "Call me Donovan," he said, stepping out. She blinked, stunned. But before she could reply, he was gone, striding through the glass doors like he owned the world. Which, in a way, he did. Inside the boardroom, Donovan crushed the deal in under 20 minutes. But his focus wasn't on the spreadsheets or the celebration toast with his executive team. It was on a woman with wild hair who didn't care about his last name or his money. Willa. The next morning, she found a bouquet on her doorstep. Not just any bouquet. White peonies, pink garden roses, and a note tucked between the stems. "Dinner. Tonight. No carpool required." Donovan, she stared at the card, her heart racing. What the hell did I get myself into? Later that night, a black town car pulled up in front of her apartment. She hesitated before getting in, but curiosity won. The restaurant was on the roof of a skyscraper. Private. Candlelit. Music playing softly in the background. Donovan stood waiting in a charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves rolled up just enough to show he was trying to be casual but still every bit the powerful man he was. "You clean up well," she said, stepping out of the elevator. "You're breathtaking," he said without hesitation. She flushed. "So, why me?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "Because you didn't flinch when I shouted. Because you drive like you're invincible. Because you didn't care who I was. And because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the second you pulled up." Her walls cracked, just a little. Dinner was laughter. Real talk. Stories. She teased him about his cufflinks. He asked her about the kids she worked with. Over dessert, he leaned in. "Let me take you out again. This isn't a world I belong in," she said softly, gesturing to the wine, the skyline, the polished elegance around them. He reached across the table and took her hand. "You fit better here than anyone I've ever known." And for the first time in a long time, Willa didn't know what to say. But she didn't pull her hand back. Willa stepped into the atrium of the Adler Cultural Center and immediately regretted wearing heels. Her ankle wobbled as she tried to balance the tray of mini cheesecakes she'd promised to bring for the fundraiser's dessert table. The room buzzed with donors, volunteers, and the usual mix of curious influencers, all wrapped in designer fabrics and polite smiles. "Willa!" a voice called from across the room. She looked up, catching sight of Naomi, her program director, waving from behind a table stacked with pamphlets. Willa hurried over, grateful for a familiar face. "You're late," Naomi whispered, glancing at the wall clock. "I know," Willa huffed. There was a situation involving a runaway dog and a street violinist. "Long story." Naomi raised a brow. "You brought desserts, so I'll forgive you." Willa set the tray down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes moved to the far side of the room past the linen-draped tables and framed photos of smiling children to the balcony doors where someone stood watching her. Donovan. He wore a slate gray suit this time, fitted perfectly to his frame. His tie was gone again, collar open just enough to suggest rebellion in a room full of structured restraint. But it wasn't his appearance that made her heart skip, it was the way he didn't look away when she met his gaze. "You invited him?" Naomi asked under her breath. "I didn't," Willa replied, throat suddenly dry. "He found out about it on his own." Naomi leaned in. "You sure you're okay with this?" "I don't know what I am." Before Naomi could probe, Donovan made his way through the crowd toward them. People parted for him without realizing it, like they sensed something different about the man who walked like the floor belonged to him. "Evening," he said, voice low and steady. "You came," Willa said, folding her arms. "I said I would." "I don't remember that." He tilted his head. "So maybe I didn't say it out loud. Doesn't mean I didn't mean to." Naomi cleared her throat. "I'll go. Do anything else." Once she disappeared, Willa turned to him. "This isn't your kind of event." "I'm here, aren't I?" She exhaled. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see you somewhere you belong." She blinked. "You don't know anything about what I do." "I read your program's entire website this morning," he said calmly. "And I called the director of the city's youth funding board to ask why you haven't been approved for the expansion grant." Her jaw dropped. "You did what?" "I wanted to know why a program that saves kids from the kind of life I barely escaped isn't fully funded." She took a step back. "You don't get to walk in here and start pulling strings." "I didn't pull anything. I asked questions." "Why?" He studied her. "Because I haven't done anything in a long time that actually matters. And you do." She looked away, heart pounding. "I'm not a project. I know that. Then stop trying to fix things." "I'm not," he said. "I'm trying to understand why someone who spends her whole life helping others won't let anyone help her." She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Then someone tapped her shoulder. "Willa, you're up," a teen named Jaden said, holding a folder. "You're introducing the video." She nodded, turning back to Donovan. "I have to go. I'll be here." She walked to the stage, heels clicking against the polished floor. The screen behind her flickered to life as she took the mic. 2 years ago, she began, I met a girl who couldn't speak above a whisper. She'd been told she wasn't worth hearing. Now she runs our spoken word workshop. As the video played, showing clips of kids painting, playing instruments, and laughing, Willa glanced at the audience. Donovan leaned against a column near the exit, arms crossed, eyes locked on her. After the event wrapped, Willa stood outside the building, arms wrapped around herself. The night was cooler than expected and the streets were nearly empty. You vanished, Donovan said, appearing beside her. I needed air. You were incredible up there. I wasn't fishing for compliments. I'm not giving you one. I'm stating a fact. She hesitated. Why are you really here, Donovan? Because I didn't want to let what's between us fizzle into something we pretend didn't happen. You barely know me. I know you fight for kids who don't have voices. I know you burn yourself out because no one else steps up. And I know you don't let anyone close because you assume they'll leave. She turned to him slowly. Don't act like you figured me out after 2 evenings. I haven't. But I want to. Why? Why me? Because you remind me of who I used to be before everything got buried under contracts and boardrooms. She looked at him, uncertain. I'm not good at this. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Neither am I. A quiet beat passed before she said, I'm not going to be your escape from a hollow life. I don't want an escape, he said. I want something real. She didn't answer. But when he reached out, she didn't move away. I'm going to be in your world, Willa, he said softly. Not because I want to change it. Because I want to be part of it. She swallowed. I don't know how to trust that. Then let me show you. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no. Willa stood in front of the cracked mirror in her hallway, watching her reflection with a strange mix of nerves and defiance. She wore a sleeveless navy jumpsuit, structured but simple, something Naomi had loaned her with a pointed, "Trust me." Her hair was swept into a loose twist at the back of her neck, and she'd added a shade of lipstick she didn't usually dare muted berry. Not quite bold, but a step beyond safe. Outside, the sound of a car door closing pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the front door to find Donovan leaning against a sleek silver coupe, completely out of place on her quiet street with its leaning fences and uneven sidewalks. He wasn't in a suit tonight. Instead, he wore a black button-up and dark trousers, his sleeves rolled casually, his eyes already on her. You clean up too well, she said, stepping outside. I was about to say the same, he replied, opening the passenger door for her. She slid in, inhaling the faint scent of leather and something warm and sharp that had to be his cologne. He climbed in beside her and started the engine without a word, letting the silence stretch between them. So, she said after a moment, where are we going, exactly? You'll see. I'm not particularly fond of surprises. I know. That's why this one's small. She narrowed her eyes. You don't do anything small. He gave a quiet laugh, then turned the car down a road she didn't recognize. They drove for 20 minutes, past the edges of the city and into an area she hadn't visited in years. When they finally pulled into a gated lot and he parked in front of a low, modern building with high windows and no signage, she turned to him. Okay, what is this? He reached into the back seat and pulled out a garment bag. Get out and come with me. You're not serious. I am. And I promise I cleared my schedule. Inside, the building opened into a private showroom, dimly lit and lined with soft golden sconces. A woman with a clipboard greeted them. Mr. Zane. Everything's been arranged. Right this way. Willa followed, unsure whether to be curious or unsettled. They were led into a room where 2 tailors stood beside a mirrored platform and a rack of evening gowns, each one tagged with her name. She turned to him slowly. You're not buying me clothes. No, he said calmly. I'm giving you space to choose what makes you feel unstoppable. This is too much. You don't have to take anything. But tomorrow night, I'm taking you to something important. And I don't want you worrying about whether you fit in. She crossed her arms. I don't need to be dressed up to hold my own. I know that. But I also know you spend everything you have on other people. Let someone give something back. She stared at him, then exhaled. One dress. That's it. Agreed. An hour later, she emerged wearing a deep burgundy gown with a fitted bodice and a soft, flowing train. She didn't speak, just looked at herself in the mirror, stunned at the transformation. Donovan stepped beside her, his gaze steady. You look like you were born to be impossible to ignore. She turned her head slightly. I don't know how to exist in your world. You don't have to, he said. Just exist beside me. The next evening, Willa stood beneath the grand chandelier of the Devereaux Gallery, arm looped through Donovan's as he greeted board members and international partners alike. Waiters passed with champagne, string music played from a corner, and every conversation seemed to revolve around mergers and acquisitions she didn't understand. She leaned in. You didn't tell me it was a charity gala hosted by Forbes Top 10. I didn't want you to overthink it. I would have gone with flat shoes. He grinned. You're handling this better than half the people here. She sipped from her glass. That's because I know what actual pressure looks like. Try telling a 12-year-old boy he can't join the music program because we can't afford a second drum pad. His smile faded slightly and he touched her hand. That's exactly why I wanted you here tonight. A tall man in a navy tux approached, flanked by a woman in gold. Donovan. Good to see you again. You too, Elliot. The man turned to Willa. And this must be the woman who's had him ignoring half his emails. Willa extended her hand. Willa Grant. Ah, the nonprofit director, Elliot said. Donovan's mentioned your program. Impressive work. She blinked. He's been talking about us? Relentlessly. Which is rare. The man usually only talks about market shifts and quarterly strategies. Elliot moved on, but Willa turned to Donovan with a look that was part awe, part disbelief. You've been advocating for us? He nodded. Not just advocating. I submitted your proposal to the Devereaux Foundation personally. They're reviewing it. She stared at him, stunned. That's a multimillion-dollar foundation. I know. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. I don't know how to process this. Then take your time, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to slip out into the night, Willa stood on the balcony, heels dangling from one hand, her other cradling a final glass of champagne. Donovan stepped beside her, jacket slung over his shoulder. I don't think I belong at events like this, she said quietly. I don't think I do either, he admitted. She looked at him. But you're the one they're all here to impress. He leaned on the railing. And yet all I could think about was how you'd say something real while they all danced around what they really meant. I don't always know what I'm doing. Neither do I. She turned to face him. Then why does this feel like the only part of the night that made sense? He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Because this is the only part that's real. Her breath caught when he stepped forward, close enough that she felt the warmth of him cut through the breeze. This can't be casual, she said. Not for me. I don't want it to be. And I can't afford to fall for someone who disappears when things get hard. I won't. She hesitated, then whispered, You can't promise that. No, he said, brushing his thumb along her jaw. But I can prove it. And then he kissed her slow, certain, and full of something deeper than either of them could name yet. But it was there. And neither of them pulled away. The sun filtered through the tall windows of Donovan's penthouse the next morning, casting pale gold light across the marble floor. Willa stood barefoot in the kitchen, turning the handle of a manual citrus press with quiet focus. She wore one of his oversized button-downs, sleeves rolled haphazardly, her hair still tousled from sleep. The space was unusually still, no buzzing phones, no staff drifting in with clipped instructions, no urgent calls pulling Donovan back into the world that never stopped spinning. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. You're squeezing oranges like you're negotiating a deal. She glanced over her shoulder. It's a metaphor. I'm extracting the truth. Am I supposed to be nervous? Maybe, she said, pouring the juice into 2 glasses. I've been thinking. He stepped into the room, accepting his glass without breaking eye contact. Should I be worried? I don't know, she said, voice careful. There's a part of me that wants to believe this could work. That we're not too different. That we make sense. And the other part? Knows what happens when people don't follow through. He nodded slowly. I've walked away from a lot of things, Willa. But I'm not walking away from you. She set her glass down. I believe you believe that. But you don't believe it'll stick. I think it's easy to make promises when everything's going well. But what happens when it doesn't? When something breaks? He stepped closer. Then we fix it. Together. Her expression softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. She held it out to him. He took it with a questioning look, brow furrowing as he opened it. Inside was a letter, official, stamped, and printed on thick ivory paper. His eyes scanned the page, pausing halfway through. The Devereaux Foundation approved the grant? She nodded. 3 years of funding. Enough for the expansion, the new center, full staff. That's incredible. It is. But they said something odd in their call. That they were giving the grant not just because of our impact, but because of your personal guarantee. He looked up. It wasn't a condition, but it was a factor. I told them I'd match their donation if they approved you. Quietly. No press. No strings. Her voice dropped. Donovan, I never wanted, I know. Then why do it? Because I believe in you. And because this is how I show that. I don't want to be someone you rescue. You're not. You're someone I believe in enough to stand behind. She sat down at the counter, tension flickering in her spine. You have to understand how hard that is for me. Every time something good happens, I wait for the part where it's taken away. He sat beside her. Then let me be the part that stays. She looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her face, reluctance giving way to something deeper. Fear didn't vanish, but it quieted. Later that week, Donovan stood before a sea of seated guests at the unveiling of the Northside Creative Youth Center. A wide, airy building filled with instruments, easels, and classrooms. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was already making its rounds in the press, but none of the articles would capture the way Willa's eyes shone when she watched her students explore their new space for the first time. He cleared his throat, holding the microphone with a steadiness that didn't quite reach his voice. I've stood in front of investors and boardrooms, but I've never felt pressure like this, he started, drawing a few laughs. Because this isn't a quarterly win. It's a permanent one. He turned slightly, meeting Willa's gaze in the front row. This place exists because of one woman's refusal to accept what the world told her was enough. She gave more when she had nothing extra to give. She believed in potential when no one else saw any. She reminded me what actual purpose looks like. He stepped down, handing the mic to the next speaker, but Willa stopped him before he could return to his seat. You forgot something, she said gently. He looked puzzled. What? She turned to the crowd. This center wouldn't exist without Donovan Zane. Not just for his funding, but for showing up. Again and again. Not as a billionaire, but as someone willing to stand beside people who've had to fight for every inch. Applause followed them outside. The sun had dipped low, casting the building in warm amber light. She stood beside him on the sidewalk, her hand slipping into his without hesitation. I think I'm ready to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, she said. He looked down at her. Good. Because I don't plan on letting go. I'm still terrified. So am I. She laughed softly. At least we're consistent. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. You're not. I am, he said, flipping it open. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, no unnecessary sparkle. Just one oval-cut sapphire set in platinum, deep and undeniable. I'm not asking for perfect, he said. I'm asking for messy, unpredictable, real. Whatever this is, I want it. With you. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Is this fast? Yes. Is it ridiculous? Completely. She looked at the ring, then back at him. Okay. Okay. Yes, she whispered. Let's do the ridiculous thing. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she drew him into a kiss that silenced the world around them. No gala, no penthouse, no fundraiser had ever felt like this, just bare hearts, borrowed time, and the choice to stay. The next morning, she woke in his arms to the sound of birds and the scent of coffee. No suits, no meetings, just quiet, steady love. And for the first time in her life, Willa didn't feel like she was waiting for something to go wrong. She just felt home. The sound of the waves was distant but constant, like the world had finally taken a breath and decided to let it out slowly. Willa leaned over the balcony railing, the hem of her linen dress fluttering in the ocean breeze. Below, the beach stretched out in soft golds and pale blues, untouched, perfect. The villa behind her was quiet, glass doors thrown open to let in the breeze, the scent of sun-warmed citrus and sea air curling through the rooms. Donovan stepped out barefoot, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. His shirt was rumpled, buttons undone, his hair still damp from a quick shower. She turned when he came to stand beside her, taking the mug he offered without speaking at first. You didn't tell me private islands actually existed outside of fantasy novels, she said, eyes still on the horizon. They usually don't, he replied. But I wanted somewhere no one could interrupt us. No boardrooms. No phones. No expectations. She looked at him, something quiet and certain in her gaze. You really meant it. All of it. He didn't hesitate. Every word. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. The kind that felt earned. Willa finally broke it. Do you remember the first time I drove you uptown? I remember thinking you were going to crash us into a fire hydrant. She laughed, the sound light. You were so sure of yourself. Like the world just bent around your schedule. I spent a long time believing it did, he said, until I met someone who didn't care what I owned, only what I showed up for. She sipped her coffee, then leaned her head against his shoulder. I still don't know how to live in this kind of world. This villa, this view. I don't know how to belong to it. You don't have to, he said. It belongs to you now. She turned to look at him. You mean that literally, don't you? He nodded. I put it in your name this morning. It's yours. Her breath caught. Donovan, it's not a gift. It's a promise. That you'll always have a place that's safe. That you'll never have to fight alone again. She closed her eyes. I never thought I'd be the kind of person someone built a future around. You didn't have to be, he said gently. You just had to be you. They stayed another week on the island, not because they needed to, but because they could. Donovan cooked terribly for the first time in years. Willa taught him how to make pasta from scratch, though most of the flour ended up on the floor. They swam under moonlight, made plans on napkins, and argued over whether the sun looked more golden or amber when it hit the water. On their last night, he brought her to the far end of the island, where a wooden arch had been set up between 2 banyan trees, draped in soft white fabric and wildflowers that looked like they'd been picked just that morning. A man in a linen suit waited with a book in hand. Willa froze. Is that? I didn't want a wedding that needed seating charts and publicists, he said. I wanted you. Just you. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Not this time. You're sure? I've never been more certain of anything. They said their vows barefoot in the sand, hands clasped, voices steady. There were no guests, no cameras, just the wind, the trees, and the ocean's eternal applause. Back in Chicago, life didn't return to what it was. It reshaped entirely. Willa's new center officially opened 2 months later, complete with expanded studios, a rooftop greenhouse, and a partnership with the city to offer free after-school meals. Donovan didn't just fund it. He gave lectures to the teens about business and strategy, always ending with, but honestly, none of this matters if you don't know who you are. He left his CEO title behind, transitioning the company to a board-run structure and freeing himself from the daily grind. Instead, he poured himself into venture mentoring programs for underserved youth, building something lasting from the roots Willa helped him uncover. Their apartment, though calling it that was generous, it was more of a penthouse carved out of the sky, was filled with books and instruments, stacks of art supplies, and a piano Willa swore she'd learn to play one day. They didn't host galas. They hosted spaghetti nights and rooftop movie screenings for the kids from the center. One evening she came home to find him painting one of the guest room walls a deep forest green. "You're getting paint on your neck," she said, leaning in the doorway. "I wanted a color that felt alive," he replied. "Think it's too much?" "I think it's perfect." He turned to her. "I've been thinking. Dangerous." He grinned. "I want to adopt." She blinked. "You mean?" "I mean there's this kid at the center, Luis. He's smart. Quiet. Been through more than anyone should. He asked me last week if I knew what it felt like to be invisible at home." She walked to him, took the paintbrush from his hand, and set it down. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She smiled. "Then let's give him a home." A year later, they sat beside Luis in a courtroom, his small hand in Willa's, Donovan's arm around both their shoulders. When the judge finalized the adoption, Luis looked up and whispered, "Can we get pancakes?" Willa laughed, tears in her eyes. "We can get 10 stacks of pancakes." They did. Life wasn't always quiet. There were setbacks, late nights, and growing pains. But it was theirs. And every time Willa looked at Donovan, whether he was dancing badly in the kitchen, helping Luis with homework, or falling asleep with a book on his chest, she remembered that day on the street when he'd climbed into her car like a storm in a suit. She had no idea back then that he'd become her home. But he had. And she'd never stop choosing him.